Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper reading. Now we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 5th of July 2019, and the news that would be covered today is given on the screen, and the timestamp for the same is given in the description and the comment section given below. And so now with this, let us start with the first article. Now as you already might be aware of, the Economic Survey of 2018-19 was released yesterday, and several articles have appeared in today's Hindu newspaper which are related to the economic survey. Now we're going to release a separate special video which covers every chapter of the economic survey in a detailed and a comprehensive manner. But nevertheless, we're going to cover every article that has appeared in today's Hindu newspaper related to the economic survey in a brief format, whereby this would ensure that you understand the basic highlights and the major points that have appeared in the Economic Survey of 2018-19. Now, apart from this, PIB or the Press Information Bureau of India has released several videos on YouTube itself with regards to the Economic Survey, whereby the Chief Economic Advisor of India has briefly explained each chapter of the Economic Survey of 2018-19. Apart from this, it also includes video by Sanjeev Sanyal, who is the Principal Economic Advisor of India, where he explains the Economic Survey of 2018-19. Now as a recommendation, you should go through these short videos whereby they would give you a brief understanding of each chapter of the economic survey. Now the link to the first video in which the Chief Economic Advisor explains Chapter 1 of the Economic Survey 2018-19 is given in the description section given below. In addition, we would be releasing a separate and a specialized video in which each chapter of the economic survey would be covered in a comprehensive and detailed manner. Now the first news that we're going to understand about the economic survey from today's Hindu newspaper is from page 1. Now this first article mainly contains information from chapter 1, which is shifting gears of the economic survey 2018-19. Now the government of India is targeting that India should have a $5 trillion economy by 2024-25. Now the economic survey of 2018-19 highlights the growth model that is required to be followed to achieve this target of $5 trillion economy. Now what you need to know is that this growth model, which has been highlighted by the economic survey, has similarities to the highly successful economic model that was followed by the East Asian countries, especially South Korea and China. Now this $5 trillion economy is intended to be achieved through a self-sustaining virtuous cycle, whereby the economic model which has been highlighted by the economic survey is of a virtuous cycle economic model which is similar to the economic models which was followed by the East Asian countries such as South Korea and China. Now this virtuous cycle economic model would include three interlinked parameters that is expected to increase economic growth within India. Now these three parameters would first be investment, second would be savings, and third would be exports. Now it is expected that an increase in investment, especially private investment, an increase in savings ratio within India, and an increase of India's export to the world would ensure the required 8% economic growth, which is required to be maintained so that India achieves a $5 trillion economy by 2024. Now the key driver among all the three interlinked parameters within the virtuous cycle economic model would be investment itself, whereby an increase within private investment within the Indian economy is expected to be the key driver that will ensure higher economic growth within India. Now apart from this, the economic survey has also highlighted that there are three other important economic parameters that would support the increase in investment and within the savings ratio within India. Now the first important economic parameter that would increase investment and savings within India is domestic consumption. The second is a favorable demographic dividend, and third is fiscal consolidation. Now what you need to know is that domestic consumption increases demand for goods and services within India, whereby this increase in demand for goods and services then increases the productivity and profit for companies which are part of selling those goods and services to Indian consumers. Now because these companies have seen an increase in productivity, it would also increase the profits that these companies are making. And simply because there has been an increase in the profits that the companies are making, it increases their ability to invest within the Indian economy. Now apart from this, an increase in domestic consumption within India, whereby when the Indian public uses more goods and services, it also causes the foreign companies to also want to sell their goods and services within the Indian market. Now, because the foreign companies want to sell their goods and services within the Indian market, it also increases the likelihood of foreign investment within the Indian economy. And therefore, it is within that context that an increase in domestic consumption within India is expected to lead in an increase in investment, especially private investment and foreign investment. Now, an important consequence of having an increase in private investment and in foreign investment is that it would lead to job creation. Now, the second important economic parameter which the economic survey has highlighted, which would lead to an increase in investment and savings within the Indian economy, is a favorable demographic dividend. Now, in simplest of terms, demographic dividend means an increase in the proportion of workers relative to the non-working population of a country. Now, what this means is, let's say the working age population can be defined as someone from 15 to the 64 years of age, whereby it is considered that individuals who are between the age of 15 till the age of 64 can be considered as part of the working population. Now, what you should also know is that the ages which are defined to be the working age population of a country may differ from country to country and from international and national reports. Now, what happens is that this working age population must support itself as well as those who are outside this age group, such as small children and elder people, whereby small children who are below the age of 15 and elders who are above the age of 64 are unable to work and are not considered within the working age population. And therefore, this age group of small children and elders are considered to be dependent upon the working population. Therefore, it is considered that whichever country which has a favorable demographic dividend, meaning more working age population as compared to the non-working population, they have higher economic growth. Whereby this was seen in the United States, several European countries, India itself, wherein when their working age population was more than their non-working population, they saw higher economic growth. And it is within that context that the economic survey has said that India's favorable demographic dividend is expected to improve economic growth within India. Now, there are several other points which the Economic Survey of India has made with regards to India's demographic dividend, and we'll understand those points later on in this section in another article. Now, the last related parameter which has been highlighted within the economic survey is of fiscal consolidation. Now, what you should know first is that fiscal deficit is basically the difference between the total revenue and the total expenditure that the government makes, whereby it is considered that a maintained fiscal deficit signals a healthy economy of a country. And it is within that context that the government has said that it is going to maintain a fiscal deficit of 3.4% of GDP in the year 2019-20 and is going to further decrease it to 3% for the subsequent 2 years. Now, this section basically highlights the main vision of the Economic Survey of 2018-19, which has been further explained in Chapter 1 of the Economic Survey, Shifting Gears. But hopefully you understood about the virtuous cycle economic model, which has been highlighted by the Economic Survey of 2018-19. And therefore, with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, the next article, which is related to the Economic Survey, which we are going to focus upon today, is also from page 1. Now, the focus of this article is quite small. Now, what had happened earlier was that the interim budget, which was released by the previous government, has said that there might be around 14 lakh crore which the government is going to earn in the form of tax revenue. But what has happened is that the government has only received around 13 lakh crore in terms of tax revenue. Now, because of this decrease in the tax revenue for the Government of India, the receipts of the Government of India for the year 2018-19 has reduced by 1.6 lakh crore. Now, the main reason as to why there has been a decrease in the tax revenue that the government has collected is because of the various tax concessions that were given out by the Government of India over the last year. Now, it is within that context that the Chief Economic Advisor has given two options to the Government of India, whereby they can increase their non-tax revenue and thereby fill the gap of 1.6 lakh crores within the government's receipt. Whereby the main problem which this article has highlighted is that there has been a decrease in the tax revenue. And within that context, the Chief Economic Advisor has given two options so as to increase the non-tax revenue. Now, the first option which has been highlighted by the Chief Economic Advisor is that the Government of India can increase its non-tax revenue by ensuring disinvestment, whereby one form of disinvestment which the Government of India can undertake is to monetize or sell the land which has been held by public sector units. Now I'll give you an example of this. The Airport Authority of India has various lands that are located near the international airports and the domestic airports in major cities such as Delhi, Kolkata, Bangalore, Chennai and others. Now the land property of Airport Authority of India which are located near the international and domestic airport are located within the prime areas of those cities, whereby the hotel industry, the warehouse industry, the logistics industry would be willing to pay a large amount of money to either lease or buy this land from the Airport Authority of India. And it is within that context that the Chief Economic Advisor has said that the Government of India can monetize or sell the land which is held by the public sector units, which would then increase the non-tax revenue for the Government of India and thereby fill the gap of around 1.6 lakh crore which the Government of India is currently facing. Now the second option which has been given by the Chief Economic Advisor is that the Government of India could also reduce its holding in various public sector units. Now it is within that context that the Chief Economic Advisor has also said that this reduction in government stake in public sector units is not required to be sold to the private sector but can be sold to profitable public sector units. Now let's say there is a public sector unit of the Government of India and the Government of India currently has 51% stake. Now what the Chief Economic Advisor is saying that the Government of India can reduce its stake within this public sector unit to 40% and sell the 11% to a profitable public sector unit, whereby this 11% can be sold to LIC or other profitable public sector units. Now what this would ensure is that it would increase the non-tax revenue for the Government of India by selling off their stake in a public sector units. But because the Government of India has sold its stake to another profitable public sector unit, the Government of India is still able to have indirect control over this public sector unit. So now hopefully up till here you've understood the two main points or two main options which has been given out by the Chief Economic Advisor so as to boost the non-tax revenue for the Government of India. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now the next article which we would be highlighting with regards to the economic survey from today's Hindu newspaper is from page 12. Now this article highlights chapter number 3 of the economic survey of 2018-19, wherein chapter number 3 is more focused upon the MSME sector. Now there are two main aspects which have been highlighted within this article with regards to the MSME sector. The first aspect which has been highlighted are the various problems which has not allowed the dwarf companies within the MSME sector to become larger companies, and subsequently the article highlights various solutions given in the economic survey that can be undertaken so as to change the policies to ensure growth within the MSME sector. Now the problem which has been highlighted is that dwarf companies or dwarf firms, meaning those companies which employ less than 100 people, account for around 50% of the total number of organized firms within the manufacturing sector. But irrespective of the fact that they account for 50% of the total organized firms within the manufacturing sector, their contribution to employment in manufacturing sector is only about 14%, and their contribution to productivity within the manufacturing sector is only at 8%. Now comparatively large firms only account 15% in the total number of organized firms within the manufacturing sector, but they account for 75% of the employment and close to 90% in terms of productivity. Therefore, it is within this context that the Economic Survey of 2018-19 has said that there is a need to unshackle, meaning that there is a need to reduce the number of limitations, restrictions, and constraints that has restricted the growth of the dwarf firms within the MSME sector. Now, it is within that context that the economic survey has highlighted two main solutions that can be undertaken so as to improve the MSME sector, in particular the dwarf firms that are located within the MSME sector. The first policy highlighted within the economic survey is that all size-based incentives should have a sunset clause, whereby the sunset clause on incentives should be of less than 10 years. Now let's say only for an example, an incentive has been given to the MSME sector whereby they are provided loans by public sector banks at a lower interest rate as compared to other industries. Now what the economic survey has highlighted is that there should be a sunset clause whereby this incentive which has been given to the MSME sector of a reduced interest payment should be withdrawn after 10 years. Now the main reason given in the economic survey as to why incentives to a particular MSME section should end within a period of 10 years is to first ensure that this particular MSME section does not become dependent on government support, And by ensuring that the incentives are removed within a period of 10 years, the various MSME sections would ensure that they become independent and self-sustaining within a period of 10 years. Now again going back to the example, let's say the government of India has allowed interest subsidy to be given to a particular section of the MSME sector, whereby they would be given loans by public sector banks at a lesser interest. Now according to the economic survey, this particular MSME section, because they have been provided loans at a lower interest rate, are not willing to grow themselves so as to avoid paying a higher interest rate on loans when they grow to a larger company. Therefore, according to the economic survey, such incentives create a problem whereby rather than providing measures so as to improve the growth of the MSME section, it has the opposite effect whereby it acts as a limitation on the growth of the MSME sector. And it is within that context that the economic survey has said that there should be a sunset clause whereby incentives given to the MSME sector should be withdrawn after 10 years so as to ensure that the MSME companies do not become dependent on government support and take measures by themselves to become independent and self-sustaining within a period of 10 years. The second policy which has been highlighted by the economic survey or labor laws within themselves should not be applied in the same manner and within the same format across all the MSME companies. And it is within that context that the economic survey has said that smaller companies, especially dwarf firms, who employ very few people, should have much more liberal and easier labor laws, whereby this would ensure that these dwarf firms do not have to go through red tape of increased labor laws. And secondly, it would also reduce the amount of money that they have to spend so as to follow each labor law which has been given out by the central or the state government, whereby the amount of money that they have saved can be used by the MSME firms to grow themselves. Now, these are the two main aspects that you needed to understand from this article as to what are the problems with regards to dwarf firms and what solutions can be undertaken, which has been recommended by the economic survey so as to ensure growth within the MSME sector. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now the next article which we would be analyzing is from page 13, whereby all the articles on page 13 are based on the recently released economic survey of 2018-19. Now the focus of this article is related to chapter 7 of the economic survey of 2018-19, whereby the title of chapter 7 is India's Demography at 2040. Now what this article highlights is first what are the changes which are expected to happen with regards to demography within India, and secondly what impact should these changes within the demography of India should have on government policies. Now the first change which is expected with regards to demography within India is that there is a fall in the total fertility rate within India. Now the total fertility rate refers to the total number of children which are likely to be born to a woman of childbearing age within her lifetime. Now if you take a look at this graph from the World Bank, now in 1960 it was expected that Indian women within their children bearing age would have around 5.9 or basically 5 to 6 children. However, by 1990 this was reduced to around 3.96, whereby it was expected that an Indian woman would have around 3 to 4 children within her childbearing lifetime. However, by 2016 this fertility rate has been reduced to 2.33 births per woman, whereby it is expected that an Indian woman would have around 2 to 3 children during her lifetime within her childbearing age. Now what you can see from this graph is that there has been a reduction in the total fertility rate within India, or in simple terms, the number of births per woman within India. Now it has been shown within the economic survey that the total fertility rate within India will fall below the replacement level fertility rate by 2021. Now in simple terms, replacement level fertility rate is an average number of children a woman would need to have so that the population is able to replace itself. Now as you already understand that in 2016 the total fertility rate was around 2.33 births per woman. However, it is expected by 2021 this figure would fall to around 1.8. And therefore in the simplest of terms what this means is that the number of people who are being born within India would be less as compared to the people who are actually dying within India. Whereby what this article has already highlighted that 14 major states within India, including the southern states, Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan and several other states, have already gone below the replacement level fertility rate. Now what this means is that there would be a decrease in the labor availability within the future. And within that context, the economic survey has said that there should be an increase in female labor participation especially within those major states which have gone below the replacement level fertility rate. Now, an interesting fact which has also been highlighted by the economic survey is that the population size of those who are aged between 0 to 19 is currently on a decline. Now, it was in the year 2011 in which the individuals who were aged between 0 to 19 formed around 41% of India's population. However, from 2011 onwards, the population of those individuals who are from the age of 0 to 19 is declining within India, whereby it is expected that those individuals who are aged between 0 to 19 would only form 25% of the population in 2041. Now, this would have an interesting impact on government policies, whereby there would be a decrease in demand for primary and secondary schools. And it is within that context that the economic survey has said that central government and state government should focus on integrating the primary and the secondary schools, because over a period of decade there would be a decrease in demand for primary and secondary schools, and therefore to ensure that primary and secondary schools remain financially sustainable within the next decade, that primary and secondary schools which are nearby to each other should be integrated with each other, and this would ensure that they remain economically sustainable. Another important fact which has been highlighted in the economic survey is that India's demographic dividend is expected to peak around 2041, whereby in 2041 the working age population of India would be around 59 to 60%. But from 2041 onwards, what is expected that the non-working population would increase and the working population would decrease, and thereby India's favorable demographic dividend is expected to end around 2041. Now, what this means for the next few decades is that the government of India has to really focus on forming additional jobs so as to keep pace with the increase in the working age population, whereby it is expected that till 2041 the working age population would increase continuously, and the government of India has to ensure that individuals within the working age population have proper jobs. Another important fact which has been highlighted by the economic survey is that the elderly population within India is expected to increase to around 16% of India's population by 2041. Now, an impact on government policy would that this increase in the elderly population, there should be an increase within the coming decades on expenditure on old age healthcare. And apart from this, what is also going to happen, the number of people who are receiving pensions from the government of India and from state governments are going to increase further. So let's say if you're around 25 years right now and you become an IAS officer in 2020, then the government of India is expected to pay you a pension around 2050. And within that context, the economic survey has said that the number of people who are going to undertake pensions within the coming decades is going to increase rapidly. And within that context, the government of India should make proper provisions on how they're going to handle this expenditure of pensions within the coming future. And one of the recommendations given in the economic survey to handle this is to raise the retirement age within the future. Now, an increase within the retirement age has been undertaken by almost every country which has seen a shift within the demographic dividend, whereby the elderly population or the non-working population has increased more than the total working population. Now, these are the two main points that you needed to understand from this article. As to what are the changes within the demography of India has been highlighted within the economic survey, and what are the recommendations given in the economic survey on how the government policies should be changed so as to handle the change in India's demography. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now the next news we're going to analyze is from page 13 itself. Now this article on the minimum wage system is related to chapter 11 of the economic survey of 2018-19, which is titled Redesigning the Minimum Wage System in India for Inclusive Growth. Now this article highlights two aspects with regards to the minimum wage system. First are the problems with regards to the minimum wage system in India, and second, what are the possible solutions which have been highlighted and recommended within the economic survey, which can be undertaken so as to improve the minimum wage system in India. Now, what the article has highlighted is that the minimum wage system currently in India is very complex, whereby what is being seen is that there are over 1900 different minimum wages which has been defined within India, whereby what is seen is that states across India have defined minimum wage for different job categories. Now, an example of this has been highlighted in the economic survey of 2018-19, wherein the state of Assam has 102 definitions for minimum wage, while its neighboring state of Mizoram has only three definitions or three criteria for defining minimum wage. Now, these different criteria, which have been imposed by states across India so as to define the minimum wage, has made India's minimum wage system extremely complex. Now, apart from this, another problem is that there is a large wage and income inequality among men and women. Now, what is currently seen is that the minimum wage law within India is largely gender neutral, whereby it does not differentiate between men and women when being paid a minimum wage. But what has been highlighted within the economic survey is that the minimum wage laws within India do require safeguards from women so that they are protected against work exploitation, especially with regards to large inequality in wage and income between men and women. Apart from this, another problem which has been highlighted is that several minimum wage jobs, such as of domestic workers, are not covered throughout India, whereby only 18 states and union territories within India define domestic workers as part of a minimum wage job. And lastly, what has also been highlighted by the International Labour Organization that only 1 in 3 wage workers within India are protected by the minimum wage laws. Now, it is within that context that the economic survey has given out various solutions that can be undertaken so as to improve India's minimum wage system, whereby the first recommendation is that the minimum wage system in India needs to be much more well designed and also streamlined. Now, the second recommendation of the economic survey is that the minimum wage should be decided on the basis of skill, and apart from this, it should also be split across geographical regions. Now, within that context, the economic survey has suggested that the government should notify a national floor minimum wage across the 5 main regions of India, and it is only after that that the states can fix their own minimum wage. And this minimum wage, which has been fixed by the state, should not be lower than the national floor minimum wage, which has been set by the central government. Now, what a national floor minimum wage it basically means is that, let's say if the government of India or the central government has fixed the minimum wage at rupees 160 per day, then every state across India cannot provide a minimum wage which is less than 160 per day for any type of work. Now, according to the economic survey, a national floor minimum wage helps the most to wage earners and workers. And apart from this, it also ensures that labor cost for investment remains relatively same for companies across India. And similarly, what it also does is that it reduces distress migration. Where an example of this is, let's say a security guard is earning rupees 160 within the state of Punjab, but only rupees 110 in the state of Uttar Pradesh. And therefore, what would happen is that different individuals from the state of Uttar Pradesh would migrate to the state of Punjab so as to get a higher paying job, whereby their minimum wage is also protected by state law. But according to the economic survey, if a national floor minimum wage is set across India, which every state has to follow, then the difference between the minimum wage across states would not be very large, and therefore it would reduce distress migration from poor states to richer states within India. So now hopefully you've understood the two main aspects which has been highlighted within this article. First being the problems with regards to the minimum wage system, and second being the solution which has been highlighted by the economic survey so as to have a better design and streamlined minimum wage system within India. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now the next article we're going to analyze is also from page 13. Now this article is related to chapter 8 of the economic survey of 2018-19, whereby the title of chapter 8 is From Swachh Bharat to Sundar Bharat via Swasth Bharat, an analysis of the Swachh Bharat mission. Now the main crux of this article is quite small. Now what has happened is that almost 99% of rural India is now open defecation free, and therefore the economic survey has proposed that the next goal of Swachh Bharat mission should be to have 100% safe and scientific disposal of solid and liquid waste. Now the safe and scientific disposal of solid and liquid waste would help in improvement in the working condition for sanitation workers, manual scavengers, apart from having improved construction of sewer system, treatment of waste which is released by industries, bioremediation, river surface cleaning, apart from various other measures that can be undertaken so as to ensure safe and scientific disposal of solid and liquid waste under the Swachh Bharat mission. Now to have an effective, safe and scientific disposal of solid and liquid waste, what the Economic Survey of 2018-19 has recommended that the government must also allocate adequate resources to undertake such measures. And apart from this, financing for such measures can also be undertaken through private partnerships in the form of corporate social responsibility, crowdfunding of initiatives of the local government, apart from various other measures. Now you need to understand that this is only a proposal which has been given out in the economic survey, and it is yet to be seen as to whether the safe and scientific disposal of solid and liquid waste would become one of the goals of the Swachh Bharat mission. But hopefully you understood the main crux of this article. And so now with this, let us move on. Now the next article we have also taken from page 13. Now this article on the legal logjam for better contract enforcement is related to chapter 5 of the economic survey, whereby the title of chapter 5 is how to ramp up capacity within the lower judiciary. Now what this article is highlighted is that contract enforcement is one of the parameters within the ease of doing business index. But because of the various problems within the Indian judiciary, contract enforcement has become one of the biggest constraint or the biggest limitation which is not allowing India to improve its ranking within the ease of doing business index. Now there are two main problems which the article has highlighted is that there is a low case clearance rate within the Indian judiciary. Now a case clearance rate is the ratio of the number of cases which has been disposed within a given year to the number of cases which have come up within that particular year. Now, low case clearance rate within India means that the number of cases which are being disposed by the Indian judiciary is quite low, but the number of cases that have actually come up before the Indian judiciary keeps on increasing. And it is within that context that there is a huge backlog of cases present before the Indian judiciary, whereby there are about 3 crore cases which are pending before the Indian courts. Now it is within that context that the economic survey has highlighted 3 main solutions that can be undertaken so as to improve the judicial capacity within India. Now the first parameter which has been highlighted in the article, which has been taken from the economic survey, is to increase the number of appointment of judges in the Indian courts. Whereby what this means is that the district and subordinate courts within India only have 78% of the judges working based on its sanction strength, and similarly within the High Courts of India, only 62% of the judges are working on based on the sanction strength. However, the Supreme Court has a higher percentage of about 90%. Now, what this means is, let's say if the sanction strength for the district and subordinate courts is about 100, then only 78 positions have been filled. Similarly, the number of sanctioned positions within the High Court is 100, then only 62 seats have been filled. Now the economic survey has made a major point that it has said that 100% case clearance rate can be achieved by the Indian judiciary if 2,279 judges are appointed at the district and subordinate level and 93 judges are appointed within the High Court. Whereby the economic survey has made an assertion that by appointing this many people within the district and the High Courts, 100% case clearance rate can be achieved by the Indian judiciary. The second main point which has been given out by the economic survey is that there should be an increase within the productivity of the Indian courts, whereby the economic survey has said that through the use of technology, improving judicial administration, and reducing the vacation times that are given out within the courts within India, the productivity of the Indian courts can be improved. Now the last main recommendation given out by the economic survey so as to improve the judicial system within India is to establish an Indian Courts and Tribunal Services. Now the Indian Court and Tribunal Services would be a specialized services that would handle the administrative part of the Indian judiciary. Now these are the two main aspects that you needed to understand from this article. First being what are the problems with regards to India's judicial system, and secondly, what are the main recommendations given out by the economic survey so as to improve the judicial capacity. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now the next article that we would be focusing upon has appeared on page 15. Now this article on page 15, which states that economic survey boosts central welfare database of citizens, is related to chapter 4 of the economic survey of 2018-19. Whereby the title of chapter 4 is Data of the People, by the People and for the People. Now this article highlights various recommendations which has been given out by the economic survey of 2018-19, whereby these recommendations are related to the usage of data. Now the first policy recommendation given out by the economic survey is that it has recommended for setting up a central welfare database of citizens. Now, this central welfare database of citizens would be formed by merging the different data sets which are maintained by separate ministries and separate departments. Now, the Government of India has various data for me, you, and every other citizen of India, whereby they have our birth records which might be kept by the Ministry of Home Affairs, they have our tax records which are kept by the Ministry of Finance, they have our employment status which is kept by the Ministry of Labour. Similarly, the Ministry of Human Resource Development may have our educational records. Now, it is within that context that the Economic Survey has said that this fragmented data, which is collected by separate ministries, separate departments on various different parameters, should be kept in a central welfare database of citizens. Now, the main advantage of forming this central welfare database of citizens is that it would allow the Government of India to analyze data in a holistic manner, whereby this would allow the Government of India to form policies which are supported by data. Apart from this, it would also improve the targeting practice for the Government of India with regards to welfare schemes. Apart from this, it could be a special measure which would integrate and interlink different sectors. And apart from assuring greater accountability in public services and citizen participation within governance. Now, the second main policy recommendation which has been given out by the Economic Survey is that it has recommended for selective monetization of data, whereby what the Economic Survey has said is that the Government of India should grant access to select database to private sector, and the Government of India should charge a fee or take money from the private sector for sharing this particular data with them. However, a point has been raised by the Economic Survey that data privacy must be ensured by the Government of India, whereby any access to data which has been granted by the Government of India to the private sector should ensure that the data privacy of every citizen should be maintained. Now, an important recommendation which has been given out by the Economic Survey is that data should be treated as a public good. Now, in the simplest of terms, what this means is that if the government is providing any form of public good, then it is doing so without any form of profit motive. So, subsidized education, subsidized hospitals are a form of public goods which has been provided by the Government of India without having a profit motive. And it is within that context that the Economic Survey has said that data in itself should be treated as a public good. Whereby what is currently happening is that data is being used by the private sector with a profit motive. And it is within that context that the Economic Survey has said that government intervention is immediately required in several social sectors so that the marginalized sections of India are able to enjoy data as a public good. However, it is yet to be seen on how data can be treated as a public good. Now, apart from this, what this article has also highlighted is that there has been a decline in the marginal cost of data. And similarly, there has been an increase in the marginal benefit of utilizing data. And it is within that context that the Economic Survey has said that because of both of these aspects, it should augment the economic harnessing of data within India. Now, when we say there has been a decrease in marginal cost of data, it means that the cost of gathering data, storing data, processing data, and disseminating data has actually gone down. And similarly, the marginal benefits of using data has gone up, whereby the government can form evidence-based policy. It also allows accountability in public services, better targeting of welfare programs. It could also ensure nationally integrated markets and product innovation. Now, it is within that context that the Economic Survey has said that because of both of these aspects, the Indian government can harness data so as to reach its economic potential. Now, these are the main policy recommendations which has been given out in the Economic Survey of 2018-19 with regards to the usage of data. And hopefully you've understood these recommendations. And now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, the last main article which is related to the Economic Survey that we're going to analyze is also being taken from page 15. Now, this article from page 15 is related to Chapter 2 of the Economic Survey of 2018-19, whereby this Chapter 2 focuses on leveraging the behavioral economics, in particular the concept of nudge. Now, the first major highlight of Chapter 2, which has been highlighted in today's article, is that the Economic Survey has said that it wants to use behavioral economics, especially the concept of nudge, to bring about a social change among the people in India. Now, in the simplest of terms, the concept of nudge within behavioral economics means changing or influencing the behavior of individuals through the use of positive reinforcement. Now, the Economic Survey has highlighted the Swachh Bharat mission, the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Andolan of the Government of India, and various other government schemes and policies that have been successful in changing the social mindset within India. Whereby what has happened is that the Swachh Bharat mission, the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Andolan, have used positive reinforcement for influencing behavior into a positive direction. Now, similar to these programs, the Economic Survey has proposed it wants to ensure social change or a change within the mindset of the people in India so as to achieve three main goals. First is gender equality, second is a healthy India, and third is an increase in tax compliance from Indian citizens. Now, the Economic Survey has proposed that the concept of nudge can be used for social change so as to improve the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao Andolan into a Beti Aapki Dhan Lakshmi or Vijay Lakshmi, apart from changing the Swachh Bharat mission into a Sundar Bharat, whereby we already understood in an earlier section on how the Economic Survey wants to change the goal of the Swachh Bharat mission so as to include the elimination of solid and liquid waste, whereby the elimination of solid and liquid waste would include a beautiful Bharat or a Sundar Bharat. However, this Hindu article has particularly talked about the various positive reinforcement which has been highlighted within the economic survey so as to ensure that tax evasion is reduced and tax compliance is increased. Now, an example of positive reinforcement which has been given in the economic survey is to honor the various high tax paying individuals within India, whereby they can be given special boarding privileges at the airport, fast lane privileges on road and toll booths, special diplomatic type lanes at immigration counters. Now, apart from this, the economic survey has also asserted that the highest taxpayers over a decade can be further recognized by naming important buildings, monuments, roads, schools, and universities, hospital, or airport within their name. Whereby, according to the economic survey, all of these are positive reinforcement. Whereby, what the economic survey intends to do is that by honoring and recognizing the various high tax paying individuals, they want to influence the behavior of other individuals so that they also comply in properly paying their tax. Apart from this, what the economic survey has also said that tax evaders can also be publicly shamed so as to have negative reinforcement and thereby make others also fearful of tax evasion. Now, it is yet to be seen whether the Government of India would agree to such recommendations of honoring and recognizing high tax paying individuals or publicly shaming those who are evading their tax. And it is within that context that you should also understand that these are only recommendations. And it is yet to be seen whether the Government of India would actually implement these recommendations given out by the Economic Survey. Now, these are the major highlights from this article, and hopefully, with this, you've gotten a basic understanding of the major points and the major highlights of the Economic Survey of 2018-19. And apart from this, what you should also know is that a separate and a specialized video in which every chapter of the Economic Survey would be covered in a detailed and comprehensive manner would also be uploaded within the future. And so, now with this, let us move on to the next section. Now, I'm happy to announce that three main compass booklets, first for economic development, second for polity and governance, and third for international relations and internal security, is now available and can be purchased on Amazon. Now, the link to these three mains booklet is provided in the description section given below. And now with this, we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.